But now we're going to talk about how to build emotional safety.
How to overcome these challenges. Because I really believe that almost all of these challenges are just extremely normal challenges that we have to have, that we just go through, that strengthen our relationship. And so we're going to sort of broadly look at, hey, here are 6 ways where you can begin to overcome the challenges you and your partner face in your emotional intimacy.
Number one.
The
most important.
Improve communication, because
skills.
we are human beings. It's how we transfer ideas. And really looking at like, how can we become better communicators?
If we can have more empathy, if we can have more validation, if we can active listen better, that is the starting point of creating a deeper emotional connection.
And for me, one of the biggest things I'm trying to teach a couple is how do we get out of our heads and really be present? Because that to me is the initial breakdown in poor communication. Is I'm listening to the voice in my head, formulating my next thing I'm going to say to Tara, instead of really being like, okay, what's listening? What is she saying?
And that, just to say that, formulating, that's a defensive strategy. So you have to recognize at an individual level, what is my defensive strategy? That defensive strategy is always going to be the wall to building a deeper emotional connection, right? My defensive strategy is like, dude, I'm totally right. Like, I know I'm right. Like 99.9% of the time, that's a defensive strategy. Why do I have to have that? Because what happens if I'm not right? Well, then I'm just like all those bad things that I thought I was, right?
It's so funny when you say that, because you say like your defense is I'm always right.
Yeah.
Or and like even though you joke about that I'm right 99.99% of the time, like that is always like that, like is like always hard for me to hear. And I never thought of that, because, and I always think about just like the logic of it, like how could she possibly be right that frequently? But really, I think, God, it's like such an eye opener. Like really, I think what I'm feeling is like,
I love having eye openers on our podcast.
Yeah, like what I'm realizing this for the first time is like, really what I don't like is just it's a defensiveness, is it's a barrier, because that's your way of protecting yourself from me. I never knew that. Like I just thought you thought you were right all the time.
No, it goes back to, childhood and people thinking I was stupid and being so many things.
Well, the only one you could depend upon was yourself.
Okay, so overcoming challenges, we're talking about 6 of them. The first one being, improving communication. Even if that's like, let's just say your partner is resistant to doing any of that work for yourself, it's like looking at yourself. Where do I find I'm defensive at? Where am I good and where am I not good? How could I get better? Because just that, even if your partner is not willing to engage in this conversation about improving communication skills, is going to help you be a better communicator for yourself and your relationship.
Yes. And so then we'll move into a second way to get through these challenges, and that is beginning to build trust with your partner, is being consistent, being reliable.
So many times couples have a rap sheet. Well, I tried this for this long and then this didn't happen, so I stopped trying. Building trust and reliability, or building trust for a deeper emotional connection, means being consistent and being reliable every single day. That regardless of if the outcome was not what you wanted it to be, you still do it. Hey, honey, we've got to do a check-in today. Hey, honey, I noticed that I just got defensive in that. Let me come back and repair that. It is not for an expectation that your partner will give you something if you do this in return.
Well, and I think a big part of building trust is just frequently letting your partner know, like, hey, we're still working on this. Is like, hey, we don't have this solved yet. I mean, because let's be honest, like there's still things we're definitely working on, and there's things that we've gotten really better at now, but it took years. But we always sort of like fell back on this trust, and we would communicate it to one another like, hey, I'm committed to figuring this out. We're committed. And that built trust that like we can go through a difficult time. We can poorly communicate today or this morning, but we're working on this. And you can trust that I'm not just like back here, stuck. Like I'm going to keep working towards having an emotionally connected relationship with you.
So another way to create emotional safety, overcome these barriers is embracing vulnerability. I think some people view vulnerability as really scary, but embracing vulnerability, like what would it be like if I didn't have to be in this relationship with like guards up all the time? Like what if this person actually loved all my imperfections? What if I took this risk and it actually was okay? So the idea of embracing it instead of staying away from it, it just feels better. Like I'm going to try that road. Now that road might not be the best one. I'm going to try it anyway.
Well, and I think that just culturally and sort of like almost like pop psychology wise, they're helping us out a lot right now in that vulnerability is in all of our vocabulary. And I don't think it was like 5-10 years ago. And so just having the ability to communicate to your partner, I want us to cultivate a more vulnerable relationship where we can open up and be our true selves. We can share our highs, our lows, like just like beginning the conversation around that being something that's important between the two of you is a way to begin to reconnect emotionally.
It's just encouraging each other. And I just want to do a little example really quick, E. So yesterday, like both of us were pretty, business owners. We get stressed out sometimes.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And I could tell like we had to go into a meeting around like clarifying roles. And I could tell that like you were stressed. And I know we need to have this meeting, but I encouraged us, instead of to have that meeting, to write like a little letter to ourselves, right? And at the end of that meeting, we were both crying. So I knew that we had to have a vulnerable moment before going in and talking logistics. And I felt like that was really powerful. So that's another embracing vulnerability, but encouraging each other in it, because you would have gone you were ready. You were like, all right, here's how I see.
I'll bear down and just get through this meeting.
Yeah.
All right. This is one where, it's easy to say this, but it's so important, is if we can begin to find a way to resolve conflict in a more healthy way. And that doesn't mean that we always come to the solution, but at least that we feel connected, that we're not shutting down our partner, that we're not escalating to a point where we say really negative things or we raise our voices. Is just if we can begin to take steps towards resolving conflict in a more healthy way consistently, that definitely will help you feel more emotionally connected to your partner.
And that's right. It starts with the first thing we talked about, improving communication skills, learning those skills. But the resolve piece is like, even with this couple I was talking about the other day with the political differences, like, we'll never be able to, we're just going to avoid that. I'm like, yeah, but it brings tension to you guys. Like, what if you were able to accept each other's differences and have boundaries? Everyone has to hear this, because boundaries really plays along with these resolving conflicts effectively. You could have boundaries like, hey, I'm starting to feel like now I'm out of my window of tolerance. I really want to hear this from you, but there's boundaries. Most people who think they can't ever talk about that and they have to avoid that subject, it's because they've never had boundaries around that. So this could actually be a whole beautiful new podcast.
Absolutely. So. This is a huge one. It's the one that we probably in some ways have the most power in changing. And that is just make time for connection, and it doesn't have to be the weekly date that we all talk about, although that's wonderful, but just making time in the mornings, on a Saturday night, an hour outside chatting, like just make time. 2 minutes
before a podcast.
Yeah, just make time to really connect with one another. Because the more you do that, it opens up space for being vulnerable and building trust and improving your communication. But if you're just like freaking flying through life, not making time for your connection, how in the world do you rebuild all these things?
And I feel like the making time, it's a smaller step that helps with vulnerability, that then helps with all of it, right? Because we're not like, hey, you're going to build emotional intimacy overnight, but just that first part of it, like, hey, I want to take like 10 minutes. Like, let's talk about this. That's huge. And it's a small step. And then you get to take the little emotional risks that then lead into this beautiful, big risk of completely trusting that I can be myself, whoever that self is in this relationship, and my partner will not reject me, and they will actually love me for all that I am. Everything, all that I am. Everything, all my imperfections, all my insecurities, everything. Okay,
every bit of you.
I'm just reminding you.
All right. The last one is sometimes the way to emotionally reconnect is getting some help, is seeking support, is going to see a couples counselor, getting involved in some sort of, like online course. Just, getting help is sometimes we just need another person to get in there and give us an alternative viewpoint, to kind of help us orchestrate some healthier communication, to help create more emotionally vulnerable moments.